On behalf of Viva Learning, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar, Balancing Infection Prevention and Environmental Responsibility. This is a topic that is near and dear to me, primarily because I was an impressionable high school student in 1970 on the first Earth Day, and it forever changed my view of everything in that I do about resources and resource management and recycling. I've been a avid recycler for a very, very long time. So I hope that you will enjoy this program. This is my contact information. If you have any questions after the webinar, I will show this all to you at the end. And I'd like to acknowledge the educational support provided for this program by Cranberry. Many of you are well acquainted with Cranberry gloves, and we have some new exciting information about a new glove that they've introduced. And so we thank you, Cranberry, for your support. These are the topics we're going to discuss this evening. And as we get started, I just want to say, so many people in dentistry are looking for perfection. There is no perfect green office. What we can achieve through environmental responsibility is lessening our impact on the planet, lessening our carbon footprint, but it isn't possible to make everything green. And I hear discussions every now and then about people that, oh, we're struggling because we can't make everything. It's just not possible. We all don't live in a perfect world, but we do the very best that we can. So let's talk about what is environmental responsibility. And I think, and I truly believe this, that we all, as citizens of this planet, have a duty to protect and improve our environment. Now, we also individually have limitations on what and how much we can do, but ignoring it and doing nothing certainly doesn't help. So we look at the concept of environmental stewardship. Again, we are citizens of this planet, we're stewards of the earth, and we try to help reduce pollution and waste, try to control natural resource consumption, those that are not renewable resources, and we can help reduce our carbon footprint by decreasing emissions, cars and trucks and so forth. So we'll talk a lot about those things along the way. Many times people talk about being green. So is environmental responsibility the same as being green? And I think we could safely say that it is. And nobody, of course, represents being green better than Kermit. So let's think about that as we go through the discussion. And I'm gonna lay out some ideas for you if you're not sure how to get started, if you haven't already gotten started. So first, I think that there are, besides implementing what you're doing in your practice, there's three things you have to do first. One is assess where you are. Are we doing some things, many things, or do we not really think about that on a daily basis? And then we need to plan. Do we need to make some changes? What can we do? What's possible? Is it going to cost us more to do that? And the whole team needs to be involved in this. It can't be one person. I sort of liken this to the person who is the infection control coordinator or the OSHA manager in the practice. That person is believed to bear all the responsibility. Well, they have to make it happen, but no one person can make it happen. Same thing here. Everybody has to be committed to it. Everybody has to be willing to do what it takes to make that happen. So having said that, the first thing that I would like to do is ask you a question about what you are doing in your practice. So does your practice or your facility currently have any green strategies in place? Looks like we're getting lots of good participation in the poll. That's awesome. I'm always interested to see before COVID, which now gives true or different meaning to the letters BC in a time frame. Before COVID, I think we had a lot more emphasis, and in the early 2000s, there was a big movement to be green, and that's kind of taken a back seat to other things happening in practices. And I haven't seen as much emphasis, although I will say that Henry Schein, as a distributor, has a great program called Practice Green, if you've not participated in that. So let's look at our polling results here. And it looks like that sort of bears out what I just said, that more people than not either aren't sure or they're not doing anything to implement green strategies at this time. But for the 27% that said yes, kudos to you. And maybe you'll get some more tips from this evening to help us out here. So when you're assessing where you're at, the very first question before you do anything else, in my mind, is we have to ask ourselves, do we believe it's worthwhile to undertake this? Because it does take some work to do. So do we think it's a worthwhile cause? What could we do? When you just brainstorm, could we recycle? Could we look for biodegradable products? Could we conserve energy? What are all the things that we could possibly do? What's reasonable? Is it going to take a lot of work to do it? And what kind of an impact would it have? And that's one of the things I'm going to emphasize. What kind of an impact would it have on safety, or IPAC, which is the acronym for Infection Prevention and Control? Does the team view it as good work, noble work, or is it more work to them? Oh, please don't make me do one more thing. Patients, I think, are the easy sell. I can't imagine that they wouldn't admire your practice or your facility for being green. There's a lot of emphasis about that in businesses. And something that if you do decide you're going to either implement some strategies or you're currently doing some, let your patients know. Use social media. If you do newsletters to your patients or post something in your reception area to let them know that you do these things. And I have a great suggestion for you that maybe some of you have already done that. And then we have to look at the bottom line, of course. Does it impact our overhead expenses? And in some cases, not all, the more eco-friendly products, at least for now, tend to be a little more expensive. And as I said, it's not all of them, but some of them are. And we have to look at, is it going to take us a little more labor costs to do things like take the recycling or whatever it is that we're going to implement. So you have to take all of those things into consideration so that you don't have a whole bunch of regrets and then just launch this system and then ditch it soon after because it didn't work. So here's some ideas. They're not new, they're not earth-shattering, but just some things for you to think about in your practice, which is resource conservation, whether it's energy or water or natural resources, HVAC use. And I know, especially right now where it's so hot in most of the country, it was 110 degrees today where I live in Kansas, and it's almost unbearable, but it gets worse inside the dental office when you have all your PPE on. But as we learned during COVID from the heating, ventilation, and cooling experts, is that you should set your thermostat to on, set the desired temperature and set it to on, not automatic. This saves energy because it saves wear and tear on your air conditioning and your heating system because it's not constantly going on and off all the time. The fan is always circulating air, and you don't have these ups and downs in the system. What that does is keeps the fan circulating and removing aerosols from the air through air exchanges, but it makes it easier to heat or cool your facility because you're trying to maintain a constant temperature. But if I set it on auto and I say that I want my temperature to be 75, then if it goes above it, if it stays at 75, great. If it gets hotter outside or colder outside, the fan won't work for a while until it gets above or below 75, and then it kicks in again. And then once it reaches 75, it stops. So set your thermostat to on. Then look at the lighting in your facility. Have you used fluorescent or LED lights instead of fluorescent lights? They are much more energy efficient, they last longer. And could we put motion activated light switches in certain areas that we don't go into all the time, so that after a matter of minutes or less, the lights will go off in a certain area when there's no movement? So maybe a treatment room we don't use as often, or a storage area, something like that. I use them in my house. I love them. I have them in my pantry. I have them in storage rooms. So if I go into any of those rooms with my hands full of things, the light will automatically turn on, and then it will automatically turn off. Many practices have large windows a lot of times in the treatment areas for the view outside. Hopefully it's a good one. But sometimes people do not like to put up window coverings, but window coverings help with energy efficiency. They keep the heat in and they keep the heat out, depending on what time of year it's in. So something to think about there. And then in terms of water conservation, you can use waterless evacuation systems, vacuum pumps. Then you're not using, I forget the exact figure of how much water a vacuum pump uses in a day, but it's pretty astronomical how many gallons it uses. And then something that was started, an initiative that was started by the Eco-Dentistry Association a number of years ago, which I totally love, is for all of us as dental professionals, and for you to recommend to your patients, turn the water off when you're brushing your teeth. You don't need to have that water running, and you could save probably a couple of gallons of water each time you are brushing your teeth. So that's a very simple strategy, and you could actually post something about that on your Facebook page, or something in your reception area about turning the water off, and make it a fun thing. I talk to my grandkids about that all the time because I like to supervise their toothbrushing. And then we look at other equipment like oil-free air compressors, so that we're not consuming that non-renewable source of oil. They don't use a lot, but it's something, it's a small step, can't hurt. This is a big issue in dentistry. Moving from paper to electronic records and documents. We have been the paper kings and queens, paper schedules printed and pasted up in treatment rooms, route slips for patients going from the front desk to the treatment room and back. Use electronic versions of those and save the paper, save the ink, save the printer toner and all of that. And rather than keep paper copies of EOBs or other correspondence that you get into your practice, scan them, save them electronically, save them in a PDF format or an image format or some other document file format that you have available. PDF is the best because then the records are easily opened up again to be read. And get rid of all the paper. And I hope in my lifetime, everybody adapts to electronic charts. I see practices that have electronic charts and paper charts. They have a redundant system. Get everything scanned in electronically from those paper charts that you know that needs to be in there. And that way you've got a backup. And many people don't realize that one of the HIPAA security rules is that your records must be available at all times. Well, if you only have paper charts and your office burns, floods, there's a tornado that blows through, and you lose those paper charts, you have no backup. You now, on top of the tragedy of whatever happened, you actually have a HIPAA violation. You can't reproduce that information. So this is a big thing that will help save a lot of time, a lot of energy. It doesn't take that long to scan documents. Many practices now have invested in document scanners that have a multi-page automatic feed. So you put things in and just scan up to 20 pages at a time on both sides if you need to. You can scan insurance cards, you can scan driver's licenses into a patient's record. So we don't necessarily need to have the paper. I don't even remember the last time I bought paper for my printers in my office. I make it a habit of saving everything that I can electronically. Then let's look at recycling. How can you recycle from the practice? It may not be easy. It may take some extra work. So what you need to find out is, number one, does the city or the town or the entity that your practice or facility is located in, do they have curbside recycling that could happen at your office, at your place of business? If not, then do you have a recycling center where you could take things to? You could sort them and take them. Now, obviously, one of the team members has to do that, and it can be one person whose mission is to recycle. It could be something that's rotated around the team. You can decide that. Or if there isn't a recycling center, maybe where one of the team members lives, there's curbside recycling. I'm not sure what I would do without curbside recycling where I live. And most weeks, I have very little trash in my trash bin that the service picks up, but many times my recycle bin is overflowing with stuff. The next thing you have to do is find out what you can recycle in your area. What kinds of plastics, what kinds of glass. In some areas, there's restrictions on certain colors of glass, like green glass, AKA wine bottles, or other types of things. So you need to find all that out. And there's so many great resources to know. First, I would start with your trash service. Then I would go to your local government, find out what's available. If you can't find that out there, then there's two apps you could use. My favorite one is Earth 911, and you can go to the Google Play Store or the App Store and download it on your phone or your tablet, and you can put in your zip code and search for whatever it is that you're trying to recycle. Recycle Nation is another good one. And then the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has some great resources. If you follow this link, if you download the handout and use the PDF electronic version on your computer, you can click on that EPA link and you can go, and they have all kinds of frequently asked questions and just a ton of resources on recycling. And keep in mind that so many of these things that we recycle, and I hear people say, oh yeah, it probably just goes to the landfill anyway. I'm sure there are areas where that happens. However, there also are many areas where certain types of plastics and things, newspapers can be used for insulation. Plastics can be ground up and made into park benches and playground equipment, and even clothing items now can be made from recycled plastics. So there's a lot of great stuff you can do with recycling. So here's some typical things that could be recycled from a dental practice. Shipping materials. You get boxes from your dental supplier. You can recycle cardboard boxes. Many of the companies now are starting to use less of the styrofoam peanuts and more like brown paper or cellulose type materials that are biodegradable to protect items in. I noticed lately that Amazon has stopped in many cases even using shipping boxes. They're now putting things in tear-proof shipping envelopes when they're sending some things, which is, again, conserving resources. We probably have paper that can be recycled. Keep in mind, though, that anything that has any patient information has to be shredded. You can't put it in the paper recycle bin. But if you have magazines in your reception area or newspapers, whatever, those can all be recycled. Your ink and toner cartridges can be recycled. Most of the office supply stores, Staples, Office Max, Office Depot, will give you a credit on your account with them for cartridges that you recycle. There are companies that will refill your cartridges, and I think it's very dependent on your printer that you have, whether the recycled cartridges will work or not. The biggest moneymaker for the companies, the printer companies, is not actually selling their printers, it's selling their ink. So there are microchips in those cartridges that connect to your printer when you install them. And many times they can either be damaged or inactivated when they're refilled. So a lot of types of recycled cartridges can cause some really ugly accidents. I've had that happen to me on occasion with a refilled cartridge. So beware of that. And we have a really good question right now. Can you recycle shredded documents? And the answer to that is it depends. It depends on what kind of a shredder that you're using in your office. If you have one that shreds the documents into little tiny pieces like confetti, then yes, you could recycle that. But if it's the type of shredder that just makes like spaghetti out of the documents where they could actually be put back together, then no, you can't recycle them. So what you have to do is make sure that you have a shredder that can shred it so small that it can't be pieced back together. Okay. If you're going to recycle plastics, and we certainly have a lot from our materials and things that we use, you need to look on the container, same thing with your water bottles, whatever you have, if they have the recycle symbol on it. And typically what most recycling services will take is plastics that are 1 through 5. Some will take 1 through 6. That's what you have to find out. If it's in those numbers, you can do it. 7 usually includes things that are not typically recycled, made out of materials that are combination plastics or something like a Nalgene water bottle. Many times they cannot be recycled. One of my big struggles is finding places to recycle styrofoam. You get eggs sometimes in styrofoam containers, beverage containers, sometimes food service containers. And I have not found any recycling facilities near me where I live in Kansas. So when I go back to visit my home state of Michigan, I take loads of styrofoam with me to go and recycle. My friends and family all think I'm crazy, but the place where I recycle, which is one of the biggest manufacturers of styrofoam food service containers, Dart Container, which is in Mason, Michigan, actually recycles them into picture frames. And I like that philosophy. So great reason to go visit someplace. If you live in the Chicagoland area, there's also a styrofoam recycling facility for Dart Container there as well. So these are, the food service containers are the things, that you get your takeout in, whatever. If it's glass or plastic, styrofoam, the issue I just talked about, cardboard, boxboard, I know practices where they're bringing in cereal boxes if they eat breakfast at the office, or something that maybe has some granola bars or something in it. Most of that stuff can be recycled. And depending on your municipality, they may have single stream recycling where you can just bring a big container of stuff and drop it off, but many have you sort them so that you put all the containers of the food containers together, all the plastics and so forth. Look at things like the tubs that contain your disinfectant wipes, the jugs, your ultrasonic solutions, or your disinfecting solutions come in. The containers do need to be rinsed well, triple rinsed when you dispose of them, but most of them will have probably a 1, 2, or 3 number on them. Laundry detergent, if you're doing your contaminated laundry at the office, you can recycle those laundry detergent containers, or you could go to either the pods, or now we're seeing the really cool, I haven't tried them yet, I don't know if anybody has, the sheets of laundry detergent, which requires almost no packaging. I don't know how well it works. They say it works well. So that might be worth taking a look at to see if it's something worthwhile. But it makes sense because we're decreasing the packaging, hopefully decreasing resources that are used when those products are made. So that's the other thing that we need to think about. I know that some of you may use reusable sterilization pouches, and it makes sense in some ways to reuse them if they're approved through the FDA to be reused, but someone has to track how many uses of those pouches, because they're only cleared through the FDA to be used a certain number of times. And then that material, that fabric, has degraded enough that it's not effective anymore. There was a big movement to use like towels instead of disposable patient bibs, and towels for like headrest covers and those types of things. The first thing you need to know about those is that they're not impermeable like the plastic backs on the patient bibs, okay? And you got to wash them. So how much electricity, water, soap, whatever are you going to use to wash all those things? And who is going to do all the laundry? So Kim, thank you very much for the feedback on the laundry sheets, and the containers also biodegradable. So yay, that's going to be my next thing, is to go research some of those and try them. We also have a question about air water white tips. I think that means disposable tips, recyclable. Those are not recyclable because they are contaminated. So you cannot add that contamination into recyclable materials. Can't do it. So they are not recyclable. But there is a company called Crystalgenics that has a disposable tip that is biodegradable, but it only works on their air water syringe. So are the plastics and some of the other materials that we use biodegradable? Some of them are, and that's a great thing because these products are able to break down into water, carbon dioxide, and a biomass, whatever is left over from the water and the carbon dioxide, within a given time frame. Now, when we think of biodegradability, we like it to be like immediate. Things will happen right away, but in many cases, it doesn't. It takes a very long time. So you might look at things like equipment covers to put on your light handles and in your air water syringe and those things. And it may say it's biodegradable plastic, but what you need to do is a little more research with that manufacturer to find out, well, how long, what kind of testing do they have that says how long it takes? And, you know, I've seen anything from 20 years to 80 years to longer than that, or they can't produce the information about it. So just be careful. So what you want is something, and this is a picture on the bottom of the slide depicting a Ziploc type bag. I don't believe it's a Ziploc brand, but it shows what the biodegradability cycle, which I think is kind of interesting. Now, there are some plastics that are made from things like starch-based, bacteria-based products, soy, cellulose. Cellulose is used a lot in packing materials now, and things that are natural fibers reinforced by plastic. And many of those are biodegradable in a shorter amount of time, and that is a good thing. But many plastics, instead of necessarily being biodegradable, can be recycled into other products. So it depends on what it is that you're using and how much of it. It may be just as simple to recycle that item as it might be to search and try to find something that's biodegradable. Good comment from one of our participants. The chair headrest covers could be used as bags for goodie bags. But if you've used them as the chair cover for that patient, keep in mind that that is contaminated. And so you don't necessarily want to take it off the chair and put the goodies in it and send the patient home with it. But you can find, if you give goodie bags to your patients, you can find products that are made from cellulose that will break down. They will cost you a little bit more, but please don't use the used headrest cover because it is contaminated. So many of our technology products that we use in the practice use rechargeable batteries, or use batteries, I should say. So if you can, if that device will work with rechargeables, not everything will, then try using rechargeable batteries or recycle single batteries. Some municipalities will take single-use batteries. If not, go to Earth 911 and you can find a place near you. Most of the Batteries Plus stores around the country will recycle batteries, and they will not charge you for them if you buy some batteries from them. Otherwise, they may charge you. So there's places where you can go to recycle those. For anyone who still has analog X-ray systems, meaning you have to develop your films with solutions and you have lead foil in those film packets, you can recycle those. Lead foil or used lead aprons in the practice cannot go to a landfill. You should take them to a metal recycler. And there are metal recyclers in most large cities. They'll buy the lead from you. You're not going to get rich. You might get enough to pay for some pizzas for lunch or something. X-ray solutions either can be put through a silver reciprocator. You can get them from your dental suppliers. It filters out the silver crystals. And then you can mix the solutions together to neutralize them. And if it's allowed in your municipality, you can pour them down the sink if they've been neutralized, or find a photo processing center. I found many times that practices have gone to like the Walgreens photo department and said, hey, we got a couple of gallons of, Fixer Developer. Will you take it? Because they have lots of solutions there that they are recycling. Okay, great question. Please distinguish what cannot be recycled due to biohazard nature. And I'm coming to that, so hold that thought. The headrest cover can be used as a trash bag. Thank you. Yes, it can. That's a great use of it. So put all your trash, contain all your trash in it, and then throw it away. And another comment, you turn the plastic chair bags inside out and then use them as trash bags. But keep in mind that it's one per patient visit. We don't turn them inside out and use them over for another patient. And I have seen that happen. The last thing about recycling, I just want to mention a couple of things. Recycling electronics. You can go in many cases to Best Buy, and they will recycle some of your electronic things. I don't know that they take monitors, or if they do take monitors, they will charge you for them. But usually in the fall and the spring, many municipalities will have an electronics recycling day. And so you can take those things and they'll recycle them for you for free. Your computers need a little more attention before you recycle them. If there is a hard drive, you cannot simply use a wiping program to delete the information, because all it does really is hides it. It's still there on that hard drive until something else is written over it. And that would be a HIPAA violation. So what you do is you take the hard drives out of any computer towers and you destroy them, not by drowning, because putting them in water does not destroy the data. You need to either beat them to death with a hammer. I know people get out a drill and they'll drill through them. I had one client who put them up on the fence post and his ranch and shot bullets through them. Whatever makes you happy. But even things like printers, because now the digital printers we have actually scan the documents that you're copying, and they save a certain amount of data on a small hard drive. So it is almost impossible to get that hard drive out to destroy that information. So if it's an old printer and you've had a really bad day, then take it outside and just beat on it and take out all your frustrations. I can't think of a better way to do that. Just be careful. Don't do it on a hard surface like concrete in the parking lot, because whatever you're hitting it with may bounce back on you. You need to do it on a softer surface, like do it on the grass. We have a comment. Our office doesn't use the chair cover bags. Is that bad? No, it is not. Barriers are optional. Under the CDC infection prevention and control guidelines, you either barrier protect a piece of equipment or a device, or you disinfect it. And the deciding factor a lot of times is how hard is it to clean that item? If it's very hard to clean it, then I may put a barrier on it to protect it. Or is the surface disinfectant going to damage the equipment? A lot of people like to protect those chairs that they made a big investment in. As a patient, I don't like sitting on the plastic. Some people don't mind, but I think that is a lot of plastic that we're sending to the landfill. Research with your equipment manufacturer and find out what products have been shown not to damage equipment, like the upholstery on the chairs. I do know that Hugh Freedy has a surface disinfectant, name escapes me right now, but their surface disinfectant has been tested on upholstery and does not damage the upholstery. So there's things you can do, but no, you do not need to use chair covers. It just sometimes makes it faster or easier. So what we look at then with infection prevention and control products and items are really two main criteria. Do we use disposables? So we use them once and throw them away, which maybe seems a little bit too wasteful. Or can an item be safe for reuse? So disposables are convenient, without a doubt. You don't have to clean, you don't have to sterilize or disinfect them. It saves time, but it does add to environmental waste. It's not huge volumes out of your practice, but if you're really trying to decrease that, then I would see if there's a reusable version of what you are trying to use. But things like obviously cotton rolls and gauze, I only recommend the use of disposable air water syringe tips, because there's a number of studies that show that you cannot adequately clean the lumen, the inside of the air water syringe tip. And if you cannot adequately clean it, you cannot sterilize it. So we're kind of pretending that's not a big issue. We really need to have a clean, sterilized tip for every patient. So if you have reusables, first of all, you have to clean them, get all the debris off, because they won't be disinfected or sterilized unless they're clean. Some people make their own reusable items, meaning that they take single-use or disposable items and use them or reuse them a number of times. That is actually against the law. The Food and Drug Administration has a symbol, you can see at the bottom of the slide, the 2 with a line through it. That means that an item is single use and should not be reused. And that applies also to some of our PPE. It applies to gloves, it applies to face masks. And I know that some of you are thinking, wow, that really adds to my cost if I can't reuse the same face mask every day. But if you do, you're putting yourself at risk for some airborne transmission of something, not just COVID, but cold or flu or something else. So we need to somehow strike a balance, and every practice is going to be different. The types of things you use, the types of procedures that you do. My first choice would be find something that's reusable. Many practices have adopted using disposable prophy angles, but there are some great reusable prophy angles that can be cleaned and heat sterilized. They're sealed, so the prophy paste and the saliva or blood can't get up into the internal workings of the prophy angle. So that might make sense to me. Get a whole bunch of reusable ones and sterilize those during the day. But are there things that can't be adequately cleaned or can't be reused? Then we have to look at that single use of products. But if I'm using a number of disposables, I can help offset that by making sure that I recycle as much as I can, not necessarily those particular disposable items, but other items. You hear in the word of ecology and environmental conservation the term offsetting. And so you see that many companies will say that for every so many widgets, if you will, that they produce where there's some carbon emissions into the atmosphere, they will plant a certain number of trees to help offset that. So as I said earlier, we can't have this perfect world where everything would be recyclable and everything's going to be, safe for the environment, but we can do things that can offset the things that we do. So we may use some eco-friendly products. And the best example I can give you here is surface disinfectants. Some of the surface disinfectants that were used in the early days of HIV were actually high-level disinfectants, glutaraldehydes, that were used as surface disinfectants. And we sprayed these products on countertops and all kinds of things. And lots of people got sick because of it, because glutaraldehydes can be very toxic. There's a big trend right now among the manufacturers of disinfectants to move toward hydrogen peroxide based surface disinfectants. And I don't disagree with that. Hydrogen peroxide breaks down easily. It's not a toxic product to skin and to the environment. So it maybe makes sense. But word of warning, if you decide you're going to switch from a non-hydrogen peroxide based product to a hydrogen peroxide based product, you need to clean all the surfaces in your treatment rooms or your sterilization area, wherever you've applied that other disinfectant, a nice warm solution of Dawn dishwashing liquid, because it will help get any residue off. You got to remove the residue, because once you start using the hydrogen peroxide product, if there's still residue from the previous product, it will smell and it will stain. Then the last item on our chain here of striking the balance is products that are biodegradable. There are some, there's not a lot, but it is possible to find these products for use in dentistry. So the single items, and this goes back to the question we had earlier, what can not be reused and what shouldn't be recycled? Face masks and gloves, contaminated, disposable, cannot be recycled in the paper recycling or something for the face masks. Paper and plastic sterilization pouches cannot be reused. They can't be used more than once. And you can tear the plastic part off and recycle the paper part, but check with the manufacturer of your pouch first to see if that paper is recyclable. And then there are, of course, disposable suction tips that many people use. Those need to be thrown away, especially the surgical suction tips are very difficult to clean. And even though on the outside of many of these packages, it says on the surgical suction tips, it says sterilizable, that simply means that you can sterilize them once before you use them on a surgical case. And then it also on that same package has that too with the line through it. That means they're not reusable. But that if it says they're sterilizable and they're surgical tips, you can't use them twice. But some of the suction tips, the plastic ones, are heat sterilizable. And I already talked about the disposable prophy angles. We can't reuse those. There's no way to clean them adequately. And same thing with cups and brushes. And this is the real kicker for most people. The Food and Drug Administration told all the manufacturers of items, either medical or dental devices, a number of years ago, that by 2015, all of the reusable items had to have FDA approved instructions for reuse. And if they did not include reuse instructions with the devices or with whatever the item was, then they were considered disposable. So there are not very many burr manufacturers, and you'll have to do some research to find which burrs actually come with recycle or reprocessing instructions. If they don't, then they're considered single-use items, including diamonds. Now, I know that just makes people crazy. Oh my gosh, this diamond costs so much money. The disposable ones do cost less. The quality probably isn't the best, but if you only use it once, the quality is probably enough to get through that particular tooth or teeth in that procedure. The thing to consider about burrs is that they're very difficult to clean. And unless somebody's going to be in the sterilization area with a magnifying glass to see if all those flutes and that burr and all those crosscut areas on those 557 burrs are free of debris, you can put them in the sterilizer and they're decontaminated to some degree, but they are not sterile. They're absolutely not sterile. And I know that that's not fun information to hear, but it is the reality. So anything that's reusable has to be cleaned first. And it must either be sterilized in a heat sterilizer or immersed in a high-level disinfectant, which we used to call cold sterile. So you need to know from the manufacturer, is the item heat stable or not? And if it's not, is there a heat stable alternative? Things like cheek retractors. You could immerse your cheek retractors in a high-level disinfectant, but why not get heat sterilizable ones? Your patients want to know that those items have been heat sterilized and that they are packaged until you use them. Bottom line here, though, is always follow the manufacturer's instructions for use. What do they tell you about how you reprocess it, and or if you can reprocess something? Okay. Now, let's talk about eco-friendly, because that term is tossed around a lot. You see a lot of products that are advertised as eco-friendly, not just in dentistry, in all areas of life. It is mostly a marketing term, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, but it's something that people recognize as a standard of quality or environmental responsibility. Just like many products are labeled as ergonomic. They may not be so ergonomic, but we want to know, can it be done? So our products manufactured from materials that will either break down or could be recycled, that would make them eco-friendly. Are they designed to have less damaging effects on the environment? And that could refer to the disinfectants that we use. It could be things like even the laundry detergent, although most of the laundry detergents that used to have phosphates, which were big water pollutants, are not legal in this country now, but we need to look at those kinds of things. What uses the least number of resources? What causes the least damage to the environment? And then we look at our individual actions. Some of you probably live in an area where you could take public transportation to work, or you could carpool to work rather than drive your individual vehicle, or not. Could you walk to work? Could you ride a bicycle? And maybe not back and forth to work, but for doing other types of errands or activities. So as I said at the beginning, there's all kinds of things that we can do as part of our duty to help preserve the planet. So we're going to finish up talking about items that are biodegradable. What does it mean if something is biodegradable? Basically, what it means is that over a period of time, that material breaks down naturally, meaning from the microorganisms that are in the soil at the landfills where these things get taken after they're thrown away, and they break down into smaller components, sugars and gases. If you've been by a landfill at any time, you see all these pipes coming up out of the landfill. That is to vent off some of the gases, methane gas in particular, from the landfill. And there are many landfills now that are selling these gases now to the power companies. So they're recycling that. That can be turned into heating fuel for businesses and homes. So there, in the soil, there are bacteria and fungi that are the mechanisms that break down these items. They act on them. And this always makes me think of the song. It's like from around Halloween, like the worms go in, the worms go out, kind of gross thought, but that always plays in my head. So we have food waste that we throw out. Some people are composters. We have paper waste, biodegradable plastics, many of those things. But there are some things that never break down in the environment, and that's bad. This chart shows you the time frame for many items, 8 to 200 years for aluminum cans. Aluminum cans can be recycled and reused. Same with tin cans. Those things can be recycled. 1,000 years for Ziploc and grocery bags. That's why many municipalities now have outlawed plastic grocery bags. And, you know, not only are they not breaking down in the landfill, they're littering the side of the road as well. So again, those are things to consider. Now, are there biodegradable materials in dentistry? And yes, there are. There are some companies that make the syringe tips, evacuation tips, cups that are made out of bamboo. There are some Profi angles. There are some face masks that are biodegradable, not reusable, just biodegradable. Toothbrushes with the handles made of bamboo, and exam gloves. Think about the number of exam gloves that everyone uses in a practice every day, all day long. Latex gloves are biodegradable, but they're not used for the most part anymore because of concerns over latex sensitivity. Nitrile gloves, in most cases, which are made of synthetic rubber, are not biodegradable, at least not in any reasonable amount of time, but they are better than vinyl gloves because we get better fit and flexibility. We don't have latex allergy. So within 5 years, a latex glove can completely degrade. So that's pretty good. It's because it's made from a natural product. It's made from natural rubber, but we don't use them because of latex sensitivity. So again, some nitrile gloves are biodegradable in 200 years or more, but not all the biodegradable nitrile gloves are necessarily medical grade gloves. And this is a big concern. It's a concern not only with gloves, but it's a concern with a lot of products out there right now. Face masks, gloves, even restorative materials that people are buying from sellers like Amazon. And I don't mean to speak ill of Amazon. That's just an example. They're like one of the biggest online retailers. Amazon does not check to make sure that all their sellers have, for example, the appropriate approvals for something to be a medical glove. And so the manufacturer can make kind of any claims they want to, but is it really a medical grade glove? Has it been tested? Some of the restorative materials that are out there are actually counterfeits. They're fake. They're not FDA cleared. And there's been some instances where these materials have failed terribly and patients have suffered some adverse problems because of that. So you need to be very, very careful. But Cranberry has recently introduced a glove called BioNitrile. It has been tested through the American Society for Testing and Materials. It meets their standard for fit and strength, the flexibility, all the criteria. It is a medical glove, and it has a special ingredient that's incorporated into the glove that attracts the bacteria and the fungi, the microorganisms in the soil to help break it down. So the studies they've done show that the gloves are 80% biodegradable in 1.5 years. That is astounding if you remember some of the other numbers that we looked at. I have had the opportunity to try these gloves, and they fit well, they seem strong, they're comfortable gloves. And I think they're certainly worth looking at to adapt into your green dentistry protocols. So they're not the only manufacturer of biodegradable nitrile gloves. So if you're looking to compare brands and so forth, number one, make sure that they should have some designation on a package or with product materials that says that they meet an ASTM standard. They should say that they are medical gloves. And if you can't find that on the package, then you need to check with the manufacturer to make sure that they really do meet the criteria for use in dentistry or in a medical situation. So there's a couple of things that I want to wrap up with here today. I mentioned earlier, I didn't put this on a slide, but I mentioned earlier Henry Schein's Practice Green initiative. And so you can go to the Henry Schein website and you can get information about that. It's not only their mission as a company, but their mission to sell products to you that are greener. Then we have the American Association of Dental Office Managers, otherwise known as ADOM. And they give an award every year to an ADOM member who is also an office manager. And it's called the Green Leader Initiative Award. And these are the criteria: using green products, using green practices, having an environmental mindset, and the office manager sets the example for the team, so is the real leader in all of this. And I think if you have someone in your practice who is an ADOM member, that might be something to look at, to aspire to, if you're going to implement some green strategies. And then some of you may be familiar with the Ecodentistry Association. They were founded in the early 2000s and were very active for a very long time. And they have a green doc certification program, and they have a testing protocol, or a screening protocol, I guess is probably a better description, for products that are accepted by them. I don't know. The last things that I've seen posted on their website are from 2016. And I reached out. I did not get even a voicemail, so I don't know if they're still in existence or not, but if they are, if anybody knows anything about them, they have some great concepts, great programs. You can become a member, and they're the ones that I mentioned before that started that initiative for turn the water off when you brush your teeth. So I think it's very, very worthwhile checking out if they are still active. I don't know. I could not find out. So thank you again to our sponsor, Cranberry. And if you have questions about the BioNitrile gloves, certainly reach out to them and they can answer questions for you. And you could try some gloves and see if they're a good addition to your practice. This is my contact information. It's on the handout, or if you want to screenshot this. And I also invite you to subscribe to the Compliance Divas podcast with my colleagues. We do weekly podcasts. And now we're going to finish up our questions from this evening. And we're getting close to time too. So if for some reason I do not get to all of your questions, send me an email, mary@marygavoni.com, put Viva in the subject line, and I will answer your question. Okay. What is the current recommendation for changing masks? Masks, as I said, are disposable. One patient, one mask, or if it gets wet during a procedure, you change it immediately, but you do not reuse masks. Someone made a comment that Cavicide wipes leave a visible smudge after it dries. What can you do? You might want to go through again with some Dawn soapy solution and clean any residue off. And if that doesn't get better, then maybe research some other products. Okay, let me see if there's more questions here. Would you still consider having cold sterilization? I think there still is some use in some practices for high-level disinfection. The problem is that once you, and those products are actually able to sterilize, kill spores, but once you take them out of that solution, you need to rinse them. And so they're no longer sterile. They're not highly contaminated, but they are no longer sterile. We were thinking of switching to metal air water syringe to heat sterilize in the autoclave. I would not. I would stick with disposables because you cannot adequately clean them. I didn't mention chloroprene gloves. Chloroprene is another synthetic material that gloves are made from. I did not find chloroprene gloves that were biodegradable, and that's kind of where my focus was for this webinar, but you certainly can check it out. And one of our listeners says they got samples of the gloves and they worked well. Great. We went through a time when we couldn't get masks and gloves. Any thoughts on this? That was during the pandemic, when we had distribution issues and most of the medical supplies were getting funded. The PPE was getting put off into the medical profession and not given to us. My understanding is that is not happening anymore. There is a quiz. You're going to get an explanation about that in just a few seconds. Selena, you asked me a question about the Ivory Relief suction system. Send me an email and I'll answer that question offline for you. You cannot wear a face mask. Can you wear a level 3 over an N95? No. You were allowed to reuse N95s during the pandemic when they were in short supply. If you wear an N95, it is the same as a face mask. It is one per patient. And the CDC and the manufacturers of respirators N95s say do not put a mask over the top of it because it interferes with the seal on the masks. Someone suggested that 90% alcohol wipes will take off smudges from disinfectants. Somebody made a comment that Cavicide or Cava wipes were hard to get at one point. My understanding is that that's no longer true. Great question. Why is it that latex gloves, people have allergies to latex gloves when we touch rubber things all day? There's a protein in latex that causes an allergy for individuals. And that's what causes the problem when there's contact with that. So I think we are at time at this point. And so if you asked a question and I was not able to answer it, or you want to ask some more about your question, email me, mary@marygavoni.com. Viva goes in the subject line, and I'm happy to answer those questions. Thank you for your participation.